Well, greetings, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started this morning. Welcome to Chesapeake Region Safety Council seminar on slips, trips, and falls. I'm Tom Meighen. I'll be your host today for this event. Chesapeake Region Safety Council, we are a regional independent chapter of the National Safety Council. And our mission is to educate and influence people to prevent accidental injury and death for a good cause. We accomplish this mission through our training efforts, advocacy programs, and a lot of partnerships too. In addition to being a National Safety Council chapter, we're also part of the Mid-Atlantic Occupational Training Institute and Education Center, long-term there. But we are authorized to teach a number of OSHA courses, and our courses are offered in Virginia, Delaware, Pennsylvania, and Maryland. Well, that's a heads up of who we are. Our doors are open. We're again teaching in-person courses. We have a class actually operating today. With appropriate social distancing, our facility in Woodlawn, Maryland is in operation. We're also teaching VILTs, what we refer to as virtual instructor-led training courses, which do include OSHA courses, and we have online courses available too. So take a look at our website, chesapeakesc.org. Again, that's chesapeakesc.org to see if there's anything of interest to you. While this program that we're going to discuss today is focused on fall-related issues in the workplace, specifically general industry, gravity and falls are a topic that affect all of us in our daily lives. Who has not taken a stumble and fall in life? I know I certainly have had mine, and I have the bruises and the scars to prove that too. So from our first few steps to our advanced years, falls are a constant hazard according to the National Council on Aging. One in four persons age 65 plus falls every year. Falls are the leading cause of fatal and the most common cause of non-fatal trauma-related hospital admissions among older adults. Well, today's program will be roughly 1 hour in length. We'll have a presentation, then we'll open it up for discussion for questions at the end. We encourage you to use the chat feature for any questions that you might want to generate. We'll have that monitored and address those later on. Till then, please verify. I want to make sure everybody's microphones are silenced. I think we can do that automatically with this system. So let's go ahead. Let's begin. So going on with our presentation, welcome to walking and working surfaces, including fall protection. Excuse me, I have a couple of settings I want to address here. There we are. First slide we have here is actually an investigation, a fatal investigation conducted by federal OSHA. A gentleman was working off an 8-foot step ladder and washing windows. So he had a bucket, rag, water, soap. And somehow, while he was working backwards, standing on the ladder backwards from what they could put together, he came off the ladder. The ladder came down, he struck his head, and it was a fatal incident. I, in my career, had encountered something not too far distance from that with one of the companies that I've worked through in the past 30 plus years. In that case, a gentleman fell off again, an 8-foot ladder, but in his situation, while he was working at a safe distance and was working properly, the best we could put together is that he had a blood pressure incident and that he had an underlying medical condition, and they had changed his blood pressure medication just a couple of days prior, and he came off the ladder, falling off backwards, striking his head and causing a severe enough injury that it was a fatal accident. Very tragic. So falls certainly do cause us some grief and some problems. Trending. So where are we? Let's take a look. Where are we as far as trending overall for falls? This slide is put together by Bureau of Labor Statistics. Now, most of the slides in this presentation were put together by federal OSHA through a grant program, though I have added some of my own and tweaked them a bit. This one I pulled down from Bureau of Labor Statistics information, just taking a look at the trending of fall fatalities overall. Now, it's not just general industry, but construction's included in this too, as is maritime. As you can see, we've had some trending increase. Now, part of that might be due to increases of employment, but it's a very consistent number when you take a look at it. So where are we most recently? Well, we had a bit of a decrease, so some congratulations, I guess. In 2018, the numbers came down to 791 from where we had in 2016, 849. So moderate increase or moderate decrease, we could say. But the majority of general industry accidents still remain to be slips, trips, and falls within general industry. kind of a curious statistics. So let's take a look at the citations and, well, we'll come to the citations just a moment. One other slide I want to hit you with is take a look at this one. While if you're in the construction environment, and many of our participants are in the construction environment, you realize that falls are part of the focus for the big four, being the primary cause of fatalities in construction. But if you take a look at overall statistics, falls are still number 2 or number 3, with transportation accidents being number 1 by far. When I say transportation, it's not just working off of on roadways and roadway exposures for construction operations. It's also people just operating motor vehicles or somehow connected with motor vehicle operations and fatalities related to that, traffic accidents being one of the highest generators. But a curious part of this statistic is you look at what number 3 is, the third group of columns over, violence. This one's always a surprise to me. It's always a shock to the audience that I present to also. But violence in the workplace is number 3, something to consider. Not the focus of today's discussion, but certainly something to consider. So looking at citations, walking and working surfaces. Under general industry, walking and working surfaces for fall protection exposures still falls within the top 10 citations issued by OSHA. When you combine any of the other fall-related exposures, we still see that we have significant numbers of citations in general industry focused on subpart D, 1910, CFR 1910 subpart D, focused on walking and working surfaces. Not a lot of complexity of this standard. It's only 11 pages long. We'll cover a bit of that and some of the highlight form through this discussion. Well, how about construction? Well, I put the arrows to the side of this one. These are, again, OSHA's most frequently cited issues in 2019, most frequently cited serious violations. 7 out of 10 are one way or another related to falls. Fall protection in residential construction, that's not really a surprise to anybody. You drive by job sites and you see people working on roofs, working on framing. You see the limited means of fall protection a lot of times. Ladders not extended 3 feet above the landing. Really? We haven't learned that one yet, but a good slide coming up for you on that. Scaffolding certainly falls from scaffolding is included in that. General safety provisions as far as being inspected by a competent person. Are people looking for what fall exposures might be present on a job site? So you can see 7 out of 10 of the top 10 citations most frequently cited by OSHA in construction are one way or another related to falls. Well, so what else are we going to talk about here this morning? This program will be about an hour in length. My presentation will run 50, 55 minutes, and then we'll open it up for some discussion or some question and answer after that. So 29 CFR 1910 subpart D, walking working surfaces. This standard came out just a handful of years ago. It was kind of a consolidation of some others, and we developed the standard. It's kind of broken down, and we have a group of very simple areas that addresses them more complex. If you get into the areas as far as ladders and ladder construction, they go into details including drawings, very specific detail. So it gets a little more specific in those areas. So we'll address identifying some of the more common hazards, identifying some of the best practices for dealing with those hazards, and then recognizing what employer requirements that you have. What are the requirements for you as an employer regarding fall protection? So the scope of subpart D, it's worth reviewing this, applies, and I'll read this one to you, applies to all general industry workplaces. Pretty comprehensive, all, right? Covers all walking and working surfaces unless specifically excluded by an individual section of this subpart. All walking and working surfaces unless excluded. If you put your feet down on the ground, if you're standing by a piece of equipment, guess what? This standard applies. Pretty broad, very broad scope. So slip, trips, and falls, are they preventable? Absolutely they are, by design of workplace and work processes. And that's where, with the hierarchy of controls that we implement anywhere else, if you can engineer it out, there you go. Take care of it. Design of workplace and work processes. Good housekeeping, or the administrative factor. I don't know how many injuries over my career, I've seen quite a few, have been related just to general housekeeping situations. Debris left on the floor, wet surfaces, slippery surfaces, tripping hazards, impalement hazards, many, many injuries related just to good housekeeping efforts. Safe walking practices. Well, what are we talking about? We're talking about just 1 foot in front of the other. Are people walking around looking at their cell phones instead of where their feet are going? We've all seen videos of that on YouTube, and there are more to come, I'm sure. So, wearing proper footwear. Yeah, the footwear that you have on is a factor in your safety for walking. On job sites and construction, you want something that has a little bit of a tread, but in an office area, tread would be a disadvantage. Depends on the surface that you're dealing with, the material that you're working on. There's a coefficient of friction, that can be calculated on really any walking surface. And the tread or the shoe that you have is a factor in how that works. And also what might be interfering with that, such as liquids, oils, greases, antifreeze, mud, debris, all can influence that coefficient of friction. So also learning to fall properly. Learning to fall properly. Think back in the days when people were popular with, when rollerblades were popular, for example. People were wearing wrist braces. Why? Because they would fall, land face forward or back on their wrists, much like snowboarders today too. You know, break your wrist, very severe injury. But tuck and roll, training people on how to do that. They even do some classes with that for people in advanced age. So definitions. In the standard, there literally is a page and a half of definitions. Now the definition of a hole, a gap or open space, 2 inches in its least dimension, pretty common. We've seen that one before in construction too. Low slope roof, same definition. Opening, gap, or open space in a wall, at least 30 inches high, at least 18 inches wide. What? Think of a window opening. Think of a window opening. That's what we have. Qualified persons, we've seen these definitions before. Qualified versus competent, qualified person. Training, experience, demonstrate the ability to resolve the problem, and the competent person having the authority to actually implement the change and get it corrected. But there's a page and a half of definitions in this standard. Be aware of that. So what are the hazards and controls? Or your typical slip hazards. Nothing unusual here when you look at that. You have your grease, your oil, your ice, your water, your snow, liquid spills, polished floors. Yeah, polished floors. Early in my career, I had the opportunity to work with a group of retail facilities, particularly grocery stores. Slips, trips, and falls were definitely a factor within grocery stores. So trying to get their staff trained up on cleaning up after any spills that they might have had, particularly in the produce department. The type of wax and polish that they used on the floors was always a factor. The flooring material that they utilized was certainly a factor that they would pay attention to. So dealing with those simple issues. Improper footwear also being a factor as far as the hazards and controls. Housekeeping, again, plays a big part here. So within the standard, they actually do address that surfaces are to be kept in clean, orderly, and sanitary condition. And we're not reading the standard specifically, but there is a factor that's read in a paragraph that reads similar to that. There's a requirement for drainage for wet operations. This shouldn't be a new concept for us. Clean up or mark and reporting spills, so employees have a means of actually addressing spills and either cleaning them up themselves or else getting them cleaned up and protecting the area. In the interim also, you see the traffic cones set up, you see the wet floor board set up to protect people in those areas. Eliminating sharp and protruding objects. Now, what are we talking about here? Again, storage, proper storage of materials, things that are overhanging that somebody might walk into. Could be something as simple as somebody leaving a drawer open in an office environment. Removing ice and snow frequently and regularly. Inspection and removing of ice and snow frequently and regularly. This is actually addressed very lightly, but it's in the standard. So be aware of that. Pay attention to that one. You know, what is frequent and regular? What's your operation? What's your exposure? What are people working in? Is this part of their working environment? Is it part of their access? Is it part of their means of egress or coming or going, we'll say, of your office area or your work environment? Capable of supporting intended loads. Remember the old standard? actually had to have loads and rack storage that were marked as far as what the load capacity was. I can't find that in the standard. Maybe it's buried in there, but I haven't seen it yet. But they do define it's got to be capable of supporting the intended load. What is the intended load? Is it one employee? Is one employee carrying material? One employee pushing a cart? Two employees? A forklift with loaded material on it? A boom lift, a scissor lift? What is your intended load on that floor or on that surface? It's got to be inspected regularly and as necessary for hazards. So people are paying attention to look to see if there are hazards. Are we really paying attention? Did the type of operations that we do perform, manufacturing or construction, does it generate debris? Does it generate some means of bad housekeeping? Can it tear up the floor of the walking environment that we're on? Can simple wear and tear affect it? Paying attention to these simple little details. And providing a safe means of access and egress. Here we go, the coming and going, right? Access and egress. With that, employees are coming into the building, into your facility, and leaving the facility. Are they protected during that transit period? Actually addressed. Pay attention to that. So, hazards and controls. Trip hazards, well, could be poor housekeeping, loose flooring, carpeting, uneven surfaces. You look at the slide on the right, they show the indication of either an open gap in a flooring material, and certainly somebody could get hurt very severely in that situation. The center slide kind of looks like roofing material, but just consider normal wear and tear. As we work in an office environment, for example, we walk up and down the same hallway every day. Over a period of years, the carpet deteriorates. You get a little thread that pulls up. Somebody trips on that. That thread then breaks a seam. That seam gets torn up. Somebody else trips over that. At what point do you recognize you have to address that hazard? Paying attention to those simple little things. Cords, hoses, open draws, protruding items. Cords and hoses, a common trip hazard. In a manufacturing environment, you see all kinds of cords and hoses available for whatever operation is being performed, as you do also in construction too. So how are they stored? How are they laid out? Are people protected so they aren't tripping over these? And then looking at the one on the right, the slide on the right, where they indicate to the picture here, just piping, storage, things that might be protruding hazards that people are going to catch themselves on and fall over. I've seen a number of cases where I've had people unloading trucks. You take the material off the truck, set it down behind them, turn around, pick up something else, and then trip over what they just put down. Think about it. Then once they do unload the truck, is your path clear to where the material is eventually going? Have you taken a walk through and made sure that there's nothing in the way? No slippery surfaces, no impalement hazards, nothing to trip over, and you can get yourself to where the material has to finally go. Simple concept, but I've seen many accidents related to that. So controlling trip hazards. Let's deal with those aisleways and passageways. They've got to be welded. They've got to be cleaned. They've got to be marked. Do you have them marked out? Do you have storage within your aisleways? Something to consider. Do you have a means of controlling that so that it's inspected and it's addressed on an ongoing basis? Material storage, work-related scraps. Are you cleaning them up? Do you have bins? Do you have materials available to clean them up efficiently? Trip hazards, addressing with those. Hoses, cables. We covered that just a moment ago. So fall hazards, what else do we have? Elevated surfaces that you might have in your work site. Tops of tanks, towers, machines, platforms, open pits. Think of your local oil servicing facility. Pick a name. But within those, they have pits of people actually working underneath the vehicles. Is there a means of addressing fall protection for that? If you notice, some of them have nets that they'll pull over top of the face of that in case somebody falls into it. You also notice that within the standard, there's a means of addressing that specifically, because they realize that you have to have a vehicle on that, so you have to have access to that point. But how do you then at least delineate the area that that the hole is there, so people are aware of the hazard and don't incidentally or accidentally find themselves in that hole? Tanks, towers, best engineer these things. Whenever they're being constructed, here is your opportunity. This is your opportunity really anytime for a walking working surface to implement the proper controls in the engineering and the design phase of it. so that people are protected from that point going forward. Guardrails might be the best means that you utilize as a last resort. And as a last resort, remember our hierarchy controls. We're going to engineer it out. We're going to go with administrative means such as housekeeping. If those don't take care of it, then we are down to using personal fall arrest systems. Yes, PFAS, personal fall arrest system. You got your anchorage points, your body harnesses, the components, your ABCs. Are there any decent materials available for fall protection nowadays? Wow, what the manufacturers have come up with. Now, we have lanyards of any shape, size, and length that you want. Some are retractable, some are just shock absorbing. Some are 3 foot, some are 6 foot. Retractables go 10, 12, 30. Distances, remarkably distant, but they act much like your seatbelt. Somebody falls, bang, it stops. Anchorage points, what are you going to tie off to? They have beam clamps available. They have clamps to go around piping systems, all kinds of materials. And the harnesses themselves, how they have improved. I started my career literally when they used body belts. They would give a person a body belt and maybe even a steel, not a rope lanyard. So which way do you want to fall? Do you want your toes to hit your head forward or backward, or do a sideways bend? Yeah. So the harnesses and the quality of the harnesses have improved, and also with that, the comfort of them too. So they even now have drop-down loops. So if somebody does fall, they can support themselves until they're rescued. And yeah, you do have to consider rescue of the individual too if somebody should take a fall. So you just hand it to them, say, oh, by the way, here's your harness, here's your lanyard, go have a good day. No, you've got to have very good training. Anybody that's exposed to fall hazards should have training related to their exposure for falls. They have to know how to inspect the material. You know, what are the requirements for this harness? Does it have an expiration date on it? What is it? Who sets that? Typically the manufacturer. Are you looking for burns in it? Are you looking for tears in it? Does it fit you properly? Do you know how to put it on right? Do you know how to wear it right? And then you following up with that individual too, not only after that training, but maybe a week later, maybe a month later, maybe a year later, to make sure that everything is being utilized properly. We've all heard the story. I've been doing it this way for 30 years, which typically is just waiting for the accident to occur. So get them trained right. Hazards and controls, open-sided platforms, runways, proper railing, proper guardrails are required. If it's over top of dangerous machinery, guess what? Got to protect it. 4 foot is generally the fall protection requirement for general industry. What is it for construction? 6. Interesting. What is it for scaffolds? 10? Yeah. But then you get into steel erection, we get into other standards too. Different elevations. But in general industry, 4 foot. If it's beside dangerous equipment that somebody could fall into and get hurt, ongoing fall protection is required. Structural collapse. Back to the concern, or back to the question, does your surface support, is it adequately built to support whatever your expected load is going to be on that surface? People, equipment, are you going to run a forklift across that someday? Well, if you do, if there's a potential for that, better make sure that the flooring can take the load. Hazards and controls, we'll hit on a couple of the highlights here. We'll address ladders, scaffolds, stairwells, wall openings, elevated surfaces. Start off with ladders. We've all seen ladders, nothing new to anybody here. Your basic step ladder, your extension ladders, your fixed ladders. Fixed ladders, quality of those are certainly getting better and better as the years go by, and you'll see why. Yes, this is a ladder picture that was taken by Dave Medeiros, our president. He's doing a drive-by through a neighborhood, and he happened to notice when he took the first picture, the gentleman was actually on the ladder going up this. And yes, this ladder base is set on the roof of that van. I guess he set it there so he could avoid getting the extra 3 foot over the top. People get very creative, very, very creative. And that certainly is not the means of dealing. But ladders have certainly contributed to a lot of accidents, a lot that I've seen over my career. Scissor lifts, while hazardous, I have seen scissor lifts actually be a factor in reducing injuries for employers that I've worked for. Also increasing productivity, so they become a wonderful tool. But there still will never be a replacement for all ladders. So the very leading cause of fatalities and injuries, the right choice of the ladder being a factor, using it properly, making sure it's set up properly, and making sure that the ladder is in good working order too. It's been inspected. Had a situation where a job site was finishing up in DC in a construction environment. One of the journeymen sent down his apprentice to go pick up a ladder because they had to do some work in the ceiling. The ceiling was about 10 foot high. The apprentice was a little lazy, had a choice between a 6-foot ladder and an 8-foot ladder. He came up with a 6. What happens? He ends up working off the top of the 6-foot ladder. Very top, 8 foot would have gotten him there safely, but he ends up on the top of the 6-foot ladder. The ladder kicks out. As the ladder goes down, he goes down. His leg gets hung up on the ladder on the way down, a compound fracture of his leg. 4th-year apprentice ruined his career early, right there. But this was just a matter of the choice of the wrong ladder. And also, let's push it up a little bit, and let's look at the journeyman too. What was his part in that? He didn't send that apprentice back down to get the proper ladder, even though it was available. So he's not free on this either. They both learned a bad, tragic, very difficult ladder, or lesson, excuse me. So using the right ladder, the right length, make sure it's in good condition. As this slide is the perfect example of one that is not good condition. There have been various repairs made to it. I've seen in situations where people go to the extent of even drilling holes in it to hold their tools. This is a wood ladder. I'm glad to say that more and more fiberglass ladders are showing up in job site, and fewer wood ladders are around. Fiberglass ladders are much stiffer. They seem to last a lot longer. Much better product, and typically the holes are already drilled for you too, so nobody has to go through that route. But inspection of the ladder is a requirement, so make sure that they pay attention to that. Hazards, simple 3-point contact, climbing up, climbing down, that people are holding on. Got caught up in one bad injury, and also a lawsuit came as a result of this one too. A worker on a job site decided to go up a job-built ladder, and the ladder actually was built right. It was put in the wrong place, though. It had been installed right in the fall protection, the perimeter fall protection, top and mid cable. And this gentleman decided to go up the ladder with tools on his shoulder. So he was one-hopping, coming up the ladder with tools on his shoulder. Gets to the top, has to balance himself as he pulls through the cable, right? Well, that doesn't go well. He goes off backwards. And here's where the interesting part of the suit comes in. He lands on somebody else's employee on the way down. So now we have 2 people out of commission and badly injured from that operation. 3 points of contact. Training people in proper ladder use, proper ladder inspection, proper ladder setup, and even where do you set your ladder up? Are they taking a look at the material that it's being set up? I've had people fall off of ladders because they were set on plastic. I've had people come off of ladders in one job site because it was a printing press operation. You made it up the ladder okay, but as they came down, the treads of the ladder slipped on the ink and it came down. I had another individual injured on a ladder one time because he had walked through a warehouse that had liquid soap spilled on the floor. As he was going up the ladder, and he had, and this is one case where the shoes played a factor also, he had smooth-soled shoes in a construction environment. Soap in the bottom of the soles, starts going up the ladder, loses contact, comes down, yes, another leg broken, another career lost. In that case, plays into both the shoes and the housekeeping and awareness of that employee too. So hazards and controls, 3 foot over top. This citation, it's remarkable that it gets issued as many times as it still does. It still does, yeah, it's probably in the top 3, I think, if we go back and look at the slide again, of citations issued in construction. And angling the ladder properly, your 4-to-1 ratio. 4 foot up, 1 foot out. Hazards and controls for fixed ladders. I mentioned this earlier on in the presentation. OSHA really got into some very good specifics as far as requirements for ladders within the standard. I'll just show you. Here's a print, for example. Some of the detail And the cut and paste that I have here on the slide too came right out of the standard itself. If you're going to build a ladder, take a look at the standard. It gives you some very good details and specifics as far as what the requirements are on building that ladder before it's installed. Hazard control. So any fixed industrial ladders have to be equipped with a personal fall arrest system or a safety system if installed after December 19, 2018. We're there, folks, right? Personal fall arrest system's got to provide protection throughout the entire vertical distance of the ladder. So they are protected. Yeah. There's even a standard, a piece of the standard that even requires upgrade for some of these systems that are existing and much older. Save that, you can take a look at that. Controlling fall hazards on stairs. Often stair-related hazards can be overlooked. We just start taking stairways for granted, excuse me. I used to talking this much. So often stair related, we walk the stairs every day. We don't pay an awful lot of attention to it. Our mind gets used to it, gets set to that. But the design, the construction, the condition of these all plays into it, as does the use of these. In each of those accidents I just described, one of those factors played into that accident, whether it be ladders, but applied to stairways also. Fixed industrial stairs have to be able to support a 1,000-pound live load, okay. 22-inch wide minimum. Angles, 30 to 50 degree angle. So what kind of a slope can you utilize? And no more than a 1/4-inch variation. What? The 1/4-inch variation, you take a look at the diagram slide here. The 1/4-inch variation has to do with the tread and the riser. Your mind gets used, as you go up a set of stairs, your mind gets used to the step pattern. And if you have a variation more than, say, a 1/4 inch, it'll throw you off. So be aware of that. And that's one of the reasons they have that included. Handrails required when you have 4 or more risers. Must be mainly applied on the right side. So in this case, we have an enclosed handrail. All right. You're coming down and you have your right hand on the railing, stronger hand on the railing as you come down. These are slides also. Both of these photographs are actually taken out of the standard itself. So stair rails on open sides. So make sure you have adequate protection on those on both sides when you have 4 or more. Let's look at this. What could go wrong here, right? I don't know if this is a setup because somebody found a whole lot of hammers to put on this slide, but these obviously could be a tripping hazard. But let's look at 2 other issues you see in this picture too. You have beat up treads. And what happens is we use them over a period of time. We just get used to that on a daily pattern. We don't pay attention to it. It's still bad until it's very bad. In this case, you can see that obviously these treads are pretty beat up, should be replaced. And also, what else is missing? We have no railings. We have 4 more. We have no railings, folks. So we would need to have railings in that situation. How about housekeeping situation? Should you store anything on your stairwells? No. Now here again, people are coming down the stairwell. Their mind is used to the step pattern. Not always looking out ahead. Here again, much like driving, cell phones are a factor, I think, in a lot of falls today. People aren't paying attention to the details. They get hung up, trip over something, bang, there you go. So no storage materials in the stairwell. How about guardrails? How do we protect our perimeter walls? Well, wall openings, drop more than 4 foot, it's got to be guarded. Guardrail systems have to be installed. Guardrail systems, top rail, mid rail, and toe board. Common hazards. Let's take a look. What do we see here? Floor and wall openings. Open-sided platforms, for example, the one on the left-hand side is just waiting for somebody to fall down. Kind of interesting picture that they have a warning sign inside the hole. I don't know how that'll work. I guess you can read it as you go by. But if you have an exposure like that, you have a requirement to protect that. The second slide, excuse me, the one in the middle there is much like the one earlier, indicating that we have the perimeter protection for the top rail, mid rail, and floorboard. And the one on the right where we have the graded flooring, but no railing at all, and we have equipment down below too, so that would require protection by railings. Proper cover or guardrail system at all time for this open hole. Posting a guard. This is actually coming from the OSHA slide collection too. It's posting a guard to monitor open these openings for temporary access is permitted. Well, if you're going to post the guard, much like construction fall protection, Make sure they don't have any distracting duties. Again, back to the cell phone or something else that's going to distract them from monitoring somebody going into that area. Is that your best means of protection? Probably not. You know, a real physical barrier is going to give you a better protection. Guardrail systems, how do you build them? Have you seen this before? 42 inches plus or minus for your top rail. I've seen that before somewhere. Yeah, construction standard, much like the personal fall arrest system. By the way, if you're going to utilize a personal fall arrest system for fall protection, some of that's even addressed within 1910 in a different section under personal protective equipment. So pay attention to that too. Standard toe board, 3.5 inches high. Where does that come from? What's the width of a 2x4? Well, we applied that for construction, also in the general industry now. So let's take a look, just some of the highlights of Subpart L 1926. So we're in the construction standard regarding scaffolding. Just going to hit some of the highlights here. With that, scaffold-related injuries, make sure they're free of defects, properly set up, proper use of it, proper training. If somebody gets on a scaffold, they should be trained on that scaffold, on getting on, and what to look for and what the hazards are, and how to get those hazards addressed. The scaffold has to be erected by somebody that's competent and qualified. So somebody actually knows what they're doing is going to be involved in the erection of that scaffold. And it has to be inspected prior to use. This is a very poor example. Over my career, I served as Commissioner of Labor and Industry for the state of Maryland for a period of time. And this was a slide I actually took myself while I was down in Ocean City. Came by this job site, and sure enough, if you look here, you can see a gentleman standing up here. Now, do you see any perimeter railings, any guardrails anywhere in the scaffold? Not a one. Do you see any platforms that are complete? Not a one. Do you see any access ladders to the scaffold? None. How about its tiebacks to the building? Questionable at best. This person, believe me, got a phone call. I generated the phone call and got an inspection and got people to visit on them pretty quickly thereafter. So we had that addressed. But a real interesting part of this too, this person obviously didn't care about his own safety, but way up here on the top, you can't see it well, is a 5-gallon bucket of paint. This is the boardwalk of Ocean City down here below. What could go wrong, folks? Yeah, remarkable. Remarkable shortcuts taken by people sometimes. Not only for their own safety, but for others too. Oh, all right, going on. Hazards and controls. So platform's got to be fully planked. Our last one was a full example of how not to. Has to have the fall protection. So in this case, we have the railing demonstrated. We also have good access demonstrated too. We also have a very good foundation. You look at that, we've got good foundation support system for that. Electrical exposures are another area that frequently get overlooked with scaffolds. So it's not just the scaffold itself, but consider the tools that you're working with too. If you have any conductive tools that might be on the scaffold that you might be working with, that also could add to your exposures to make sure you have adequate protection for that. Scaffold platforms, if it's a railing or freestanding, 4-to-1 ratio, 4 foot up, 1 foot across. You can use outriggers to help stabilize the platform. How about rolling scaffolds? You to transport people around in a rolling scaffold? Not a good idea. This is a great picture. OSHA provided this picture too. Yeah. If your scaffold is covered with defects like this, I think it's time to get rid of it. In addition to not having any real adequate fall protection, but it looks like it might be at about 6 or 7 foot level. But it's interesting that they put a piece of strut here and just wire tied it on top of that damaged scaffold, so they can put about a ton of concrete block on top of it to support it. Wow. And I don't see any cross braces there to support it either. So this was a disaster just waiting to happen. Scissor lifts. Scissor lifts are addressed also. ANSI has come out with a new standard on aerial lift and aerial lift platforms, including scissor and boom lifts. But scissor lifts, while they're a wonderfully productive piece of equipment, make sure people are trained properly. You read the owner's manual. People are familiar with the operating controls and the limitations. You're familiar with the grade of what operation you might be working on, as far as with the transit and also the working area, the grade, the elevation. Avoid upset. Also, is your ground supportive? Is your structure supportive? Excuse me, there's a lawnmower operating outside my window right now. Is the ground supportive, and you won't have an opportunity for anything to fall in to the ground and upset the scaffold. And also wind exposures. You have a potential wind exposure if you're operating outside, and all considerations. But with those, make sure people are properly trained. And do you need supplemental fall protection if you have railings? You may, and that might be a requirement. Manufacturer might address that also. General contractor might address that also. Sometimes people get lazy and want to stand on the mid rails. Not a recommended practice. Hazard control, stabilization, positioning, what could upset it? You know, vehicle traffic, is it set up an area where you might have vehicle traffic? I had one situation on a job site, somebody was operating a scissor lift, but they were welding from it. Welding leads run up to the scissor lift. They decided to transit, move the lift another 20 feet. As they did that, the welding lead was wrapped around the railing. Bottom of the scissor lift doesn't recognize this, upset the scissor lift because the cable for the welding lead was secured at both ends. Dropped it over. So general exposures. We'll address wind exposures with scissor lifts. Kind of interesting. Got a question coming up for you. Rope descent devices. Well, think about window washers. Anchorage certification by the building owner. Now this is a twist. This is something that's different under Subpart D, 1910 Subpart D. But is your rope descent system actually certified by the building owner? Is it safe? Is it safe? Who's going to put the name on that? 300-foot maximum. Well, with that, also training requirements. No surprise there. Inspection. Yeah, I would certainly inspect that. Separate safety lines, fall arrest systems, and rescue systems in effect. How many window washer programs or window washing operations out there have really well practiced or effective rescue systems put together? Don't have an answer for that, but I don't feel comfortable that it's every one of them. I think many of them probably just expect or anticipate the local fire department would be their response, and that's not the way you want to go. So employer requirements. You as an employer, what are your requirements? Prevent employees from being injured. Got to guard every floor or hole into which a worker can fall. Provide guardrails and toe boards around every open-sided platform. It's 4 foot high, or if you have dangerous equipment within that area, employees can fall into. Regardless of the height, protect that equipment, the employees from the equipment. Other means of fall protection goes under the personal fall arrest system, falls into PPE, 1910-140, also a subpart within the 1910 standard PPE, so address that. Safety nets, rarely used. You might use it in that grease pit application. Travel restraints, fall protection. With training and retraining of people, I think it's always a requirement, always a recommended practice. Guardrail systems, nothing particularly new for most of our audience. You know, 42 inches plus or minus 3, with a mid rail at about 21, and it's supposed to, that top rail is supposed to support, get this, 200 pounds in a downward outward direction. 200 pounds. So that's a big employee. Not encouraging him to do this, but sitting on that guardrail, is it going to hold him? What if that employee is 3 feet away and they trip and fall into the guardrail? Is it now 200 pounds or more? So this is a minimum requirement. I always look at this as a very minimum requirement. You should go over it, much like many of the OSHA standards. And also the requirement for the 3.5 foot toe board. This drawing also comes out of, this figure also comes out of the standard itself. It's a cut and paste. Well, floor coverings. We showed that picture of the opening with the sign on the inside. With that opening, how should they protect that? Well, if you put a cover on, it's got to take twice any intended load, and it's got to be secured so it can't be displaced. Well, it doesn't mean you have to screw it down. It can still be a hatchway with a hinge and a latch on it. This is a general industry side, but how about construction? Okay, the 2 times intended load, yeah. Secured, yeah, so it can't be accidentally displaced, yeah. But anything else? Under construction, you have to mark it. You got to label it, hole or cover. For general industry, is that a good practice? A recommended practice that people know that that's an opening? Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But it's not built within the standard that way. So other employer requirements, working conditions free of known dangers. So if you walk through and you see the hazard, you have to provide a means of protecting your employee, even in the interim, until you come up with a permanent means. It's still going to protect them temporarily. Keep floors, work areas clean. Select, provide personal protective equipment at no cost to employers, to the employees. Yeah, no, nothing new there. And train them on the hazards. All right, let's take a look at some of the hazards that might be out there. Some photographs that OSHA supplied through West Virginia University. So we have the open pit here on the left-hand side. Clearly we have a hazard. Within the standard, there's a means of addressing that. There actually is a little section, a couple of paragraphs that actually address how to deal with servicing pits like that. Your opening here in the second slide, in the center one, clearly I would put a protective covering on top of that. On the right, well, this is a matter of housekeeping, improvement of housekeeping in that situation. Well, what do we do here on the left-hand side? We have somebody working off the top of the ladder. I think a couple of things are necessary. One, they need a taller ladder. Yeah, simple enough. But would retraining possibly be a good opportunity here for not only this individual, but his co-worker who's standing there letting him do it and not stopping him from that? Yeah. Center slide. All right, we have an extension ladder set up. We got to balance out the one side with whatever we can find. Yeah, not a recognized practice. That could easily kick out. And this poor individual here on the right-hand side, he just keeps popping up in slides from motion. So obviously he should have an extension ladder, set up in a proper arrangement for that, because he has clearly a fall coming off of that step ladder into that situation. On the left side, we have a photograph of a welder on top of the tank. We have two things going on, I think, also here. One, you'd have to provide railing protection or at least a personal fall arrest system for the welder. But also consider we have a welder. What's the problem with that? They tend to lose perspective. Their field of vision is here. So if they're following the weld and the weld goes off the edge, they might very well follow with that. So additional protection, I think, is in order for anybody that's doing welding operations. Center slide, center picture, not a very good picture, but you can see we have a wall opening where there's a walkway in the background. The wall opening is not protected. The right side is actually a conveyor system, a conveyor pit, with about a 12-foot fall with no protection. Obviously, it should be protected. Look at your slide here, picture on the left-hand side. Obviously, we have some damage to a ladder. I don't see any supplemental fall protection for this ladder, and it certainly continues to go up and up and up. So a couple means we want to take a look at. The center picture indicates where we had a cage, but somebody took a bite out of it, and we only have part of the cage now. So we've got a hazard, certainly an exposure there. And on the right side, the issue that they have with that is if you had to climb this ladder, we realize it's to be rotated in place, but if you had to climb this, your toes are bumping against the back wall of the tank. Again, the standard goes into some very specific details as far as how you would build that ladder and what kind of distance the person should have from the back wall to the ladder tread. Actually detailed within the standard. Next slide, looking at the left situation where we have not only a lack of railing for the stairs. The stairs look to be fairly well constructed. We don't have any railing for that, nor do we have a railing for the platform too. What if we would have had an actual door and not just a roll-up door, but actual a man door, passageway door there? Then you'd have to account for the door swing too. The center slide, so we're looking at 3 steps, kind of. So we even change step patterns on the way up and include a little bit of a trip hazard on the left-hand side there for people to fall over. Again, no railing and also just improper steps altogether. The slide on the right, far right, then it's really just a lack of the kickboard or toe board that we have on that case. Next slide, taking a look at scaffolding arrangement. So what kind of base is your scaffold set on? Is that a proper mud sill? I'm not falling for that one. No. So making sure they have a proper sill platform for that. Center slide. I don't know what the elevation is, but probably needs a railing and probably needs a whole platform to put on that also. And on the right side, what's your means of access for a scaffold? Not climbing up the end buck. The masonry bucket, that is not the way to do it. Need proper protection. So let's take a look. Let's test you a little bit. little question answer here, shall we? You're going to take your own answers to this. Okay, I can't see all your hands, so this one's up to you. An honesty scale. Slips, trips, and falls make up what percent of all accidental deaths? Slips, trips, and falls make up what percent of accidental deaths? As high as 50, as low as 2? Now, those look extreme. How about 15? Now, if we took out transportation-related accidents, that number would be much, much higher. Probably double, maybe triple. Yeah. Easiest, most accurate way to use a portable ladder according to the manufacturer. You're going to call them on your cell phone, download the internet. You're going to take a look at what a label happens to say on the ladder. There are labels on ladders. Again, there's a requirement that you keep those in good working order also. Not only the general condition of the ladder, but you can read a legible label. So that's actually a part of it too. So read and follow all warning labels and stickers. And they certainly do have a lot of information available in those stickers today. Using a portable ladder, access another level. Step ladder, can you use that? I remember a guy back in the slide coming off that roof. Portable ladders may never be used. Never? What? What's the sense of a portable ladder? Got to be secure and extend 3 foot above. Carrying tools permitted? Well, I think we all know the answer to that. Ladder should be secured and extend 3 feet above the level that you're assessing. All right. Knowledge check. Maximum work level of a freestanding scaffold never exceed, remember, our base to height ratio, much like the ladder, happens to be 4 to 1. 4 to 1, but in the reverse. What describes safe scaffold? Firm foundation, covered that. Proper access, covered that. Proper guardrail, covered that. You also put together that's assembled by a competent qualified person. It includes all of those, certainly all of those above. Well, this is one we didn't cover, but we're going to right now. Scissor lifts for outdoor use, generally limited to wind speeds below, we call Notre Dame, I believe it was Notre Dame University, going back, I don't know, maybe 10 years now. Had a scissor lift on their football field, it might have been the practice field, where they were videotaping the band performing a practice. And students, I believe there are 2 students were on that scissor lift, encountered high winds. The scissor lift blew over. I think both were fatalities. I recall both were fatalities, yeah. But how they came up with this number, 28 miles per hour, I don't know. But if anybody does, yeah, let me know. Curious. But yeah, came up with the random number of 28 miles per hour winds, generally. All right, height of a proper guardrail. Do we even have to ask this question? 42 inches, plus or minus 3. That's it. That is our presentation. I've been at this for 55 minutes now. We are going to open this up for questions. We'll address those questions by chat. And Debbie Jennings is in the background. She's going to help me with that. So if you have any questions or comments, we can certainly address those for you now. So I am going to stop sharing my screen here, and we'll go to the chat.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Debbie Jennings, as Tom mentioned, and we're glad that all of you are with us. We do have several questions, and continue to type some more in the chat if you wish. The first question, I am thinking of creating a phone safety zone for people to use while on the factory floor. These areas would be safe from lift traffic, but the person would need to stop and use their phone there. Do you think this may be a good idea for our factory, and have other companies done something similar?
Well, I have not heard of that, but wow, that's a wonderful approach. I don't know what your allowance is for people with cell phones right now, but just from a personnel standpoint, you can anticipate some pushback. And then you'd have to deal with the aspect of also people saying, well, how far away, where's the phone safe zone and how far do they have to go? But no, I compliment you. I think that's a great idea, though.
I've actually been to National Safety Council headquarters, and they have a policy that if you're walking, you cannot be looking at your phone on site.
I have come across that. I have seen that. Yeah.
Yeah. Next question. Storage systems for tie-off at regularly serviced unprotected locations, for example, manholes, and I guess that's what it's in reference to. Is there an equipment maintenance frequency, weekly, monthly, quarterly, at which OSHA mandates installation of permanent anchorage, guarding, or other systems?
Now, I'm not aware of they having any really time related other than, frequent and regular. So they fall back to that often enough. But I'm not aware of there being any really time required restrictions as far as when they're going to have to install something permanent.
Okay, good. Last question. Slip resistant, in reference to slip resistance. Does OSHA still recommend a minimum static coefficient of friction of 0.5 as a guide to achieve proper slip resistance for walking working surfaces? And
well, you got me on that, but you're right. There is a coefficient of friction number, and what it is, I'd have to pull it up to see if there's some reference to that in the standard. I don't have it memorized. Yeah, but there is. I have seen a reference to that before. Yes.
Okay. And then, as always, and Tom didn't bring it up this time, but we usually do. This this presentation has been recorded, and you're going to be able to see it on our Facebook, our YouTube channel, and posted to our website shortly after it's over. And if you have any questions regarding this, you can certainly send them in to safety@chesapeakesc.org. And if you're interested in learning more, we offer a variety of classes that will address this. And Tom is often one of our presenters. He's definitely the go-to on our VILTs lately, and we've enjoyed having you all on with us today. Thank you so much. Have a great day.